for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, as artificial intelligence disrupts the workplace, relationships, and especially education, it's also changing our definition of human intelligence. We ask two education experts how to assess aptitude in an age of AI. Later in the program, the epic and emotional history of World War II set to the soundtrack by the symphony and Broadway vocalists. We talk to the homegrown historian whose appreciation for the past is rooted in his own remarkable family's history. But first, reading, writing, and arithmetic will never be the same and soon may not even be measures of academic achievement. Here to talk about it, I'm joined in studio by Rachael Tutwiler Fortune, president of the Jacksonville Public Education Fund. Good morning, Rachael. Welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you, Ann.
We're also joined on the phone by Isabelle Hau, executive director of Stanford University's Accelerator for Learning, and also the keynote speaker at JPEF's upcoming EDTalk on September 23rd. Isabelle, good morning.
Good morning, Anne, and good morning, Rachael.
Good morning.
It's wonderful to have you both here. Isabelle, you've said that concepts of human intelligence that we've honored for hundreds of years are becoming outdated. And, we've traditionally measured intelligence by certain metrics. I wonder if you can just kind of remind us what is changing right now, what we've traditionally used to measure something perhaps called IQ, and why we're moving away from that.
Yeah, when we think, when we all of us think about human intelligence, and suddenly when I do, I think about this very traditional measure of human intelligence, which is IQ, which is largely a cognitive measure of human intelligence. But things are changing, as you point out, with artificial intelligence that is providing so much information at our fingerprint, and also changing a lot of our machine-human relationships. So we need to evolve some of those concepts. We need to have children learn maybe different things and in different ways. AI is changing how we learn and how we teach, and even the nature of our jobs.
It's interesting, Isabelle, because, you work at Stanford. Just yesterday, Stanford University published a first of its kind study looking at the impacts of AI. And what they were looking at, the study is called Canaries in the Coal Mine, and it is looking at, impacts of AI, particularly on entry-level jobs, young people entering the workforce, and basically, showed with numbers and their analysis what a lot of people have been worrying about, which is huge impacts on people's employment, and particularly in some fields that AI is starting to dominate, things like computer coding, customer service. How do you see the future of AI in education and in the classroom? Do you see it as displacing these traditional notions? Do you see it as displacing traditional roles, for instance, of teachers?
Yeah, and by the way, there were two very interesting reports yesterday published by Stanford. The one that you are pointing out to, which was focused on the impact on entry-level jobs, and then there was another one that was the sister paper, if you like. And the sister paper had also something really interesting where they were elevating what type of jobs will continue thriving and what kind of occupations will continue thriving in the future. And they had this concept called human agency scale, if you allow me for a little bit of an academic term, which means that those jobs which will be very human-centered will continue thriving. And in particular, and Rachael and I would love this conclusion, one of the rising type of occupation that was highlighted in that other report was skills like training and teaching others, which are rising in value in our society. So as AI transforms knowledge work, what remains uniquely human is maybe our capacity to connect and to guide, to exercise what I call relational intelligence.
And I know that relational intelligence is going to be one of the subjects that you're going to be talking about at this EDTalk, Rachael. And you're going to be having an extended conversation with Isabelle about some of these same things. I want to talk about that and how that is maybe a new way to assess human intelligence. But I also want to just kind of get clear. Do you think that AI is going to supplant what we currently think of as the core forms of knowledge? I mean, I mentioned in the intro, reading, writing, arithmetic, these things that we use to measure intelligence and often, aptitude. Are those things going
Yeah.
away?
So in our minds at Stanford, at the Graduate School of Education, we don't believe they are going away because you need to have a body of knowledge to be able to understand and think critically about what you see, what you hear, what you learn. And so those foundational skills will remain. Our view is more that we will also need different types of skills that will continue rising, such as teamwork, such as communication, all these relational skills, as well as adaptability and creativity and problem solving, because our children will have for sure more and more job transitions. And we know this already. The number of occupations that any human has right now has already doubled over the past, I think it's 10 years or so. And so it is clear already that this future generation will have more and more different occupations. So the need for adaptability in education are rising, and adaptability is very close to creativity. So we need to have our children really, and education systems really lead us toward these concepts of relational skills, adaptability, creativity. And then the third area, which also is rising as a big new need, and it was already there in our schools, but it's taking a different form, is digital literacy, including AI literacy. So we need to have our children know how to ask the right questions, to evaluate the information that they get, and that's going to be more and more complicated, and use tools as responsibly as we can.
Yeah, Rachel, I want to kind of ask you that, and also in a different way, because you and I and everybody in our world today knows people professionally who are leaning on AI to do jobs that they once either had to do themselves or find someone to do for them. And I find it hard to imagine that the basic skills, whether it's things that we do on the job or things that we're learning in school, that we're going to retain the same requirement of knowing those things when AI is capable of doing them.
Yeah. No, I think Isabel explained it incredibly well, and I couldn't agree more. And it's why we're so excited to have her thought leadership in our community as a part of the upcoming Ed Talks. Um, Students are absolutely going to continue to need those strong academic foundational skills. As we think about the future and the types of things that they're going to think about and need to grapple with professionally and just even in their lives, they're going to need to be able to think critically. Like, as you mentioned, with these technologies being able to increase efficiencies and, help us, get perhaps that much more productive in our output and things of that nature. I think the challenge is not so much in making sure that we as humans don't need to think ourselves or have kind of that strong foundation for being able to understand and interpret and grapple with ideas, but it is that much more about how do we alongside and these technologies make sure that we are positioned to make decisions that are going to, move us forward in the best manner possible. And so the only way we get that is if we as human beings are equipped and able to utilize our own knowledge alongside these technologies, which are just making us that much more efficient along the way.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about AI in education. It is a conversation that is going to be carried on in a greater extent at JPEF's upcoming Ed Talk in September. If you'd like to join our conversation, or if you have questions about AI in the classroom, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, or X at FCC On Air. Rachel, I believe that there are optimistic ways of looking at AI, and there's kind of more cynical ways of looking at AI. And it is a hopeful way to look at it, to think that we're going to have all this extra
Hmm.
time to devote to thinking big thoughts or being creative, because all of these smaller tasks will be handled by AI. Um, but I would imagine that there's a lot of people in your world, in the world of education, that see a less rosy future
Hmm.
that has to do with just a general erosion of our ability to think, because we're not doing these fundamental tasks. We're not learning the most basic skills because we won't be required to, the
Hmm.
building blocks of knowledge and understanding. So, are you able to project that optimistic view when you're having conversations with local educators?
Yeah, I'll say that, even just a few years ago, I too had a lot of fear and trepidation around these technologies. And I think that those who have those concerns, it's rightfully so. I think when we have these conversations about generative AI and the capabilities of these tools, and quite frankly, if we're not using them responsibly, some of the concerns and challenging things that can happen as a result of that, then um, there is a lot to be concerned about. And I think that's why it's just so important that we have this conversation in a way that really centers learning and education, and really making sure that we're thinking about what skills we need to be developing in young people so that they are prepared in a world. We're not going to turn back the hands of time and perhaps reverse the course that we're on with these technologies existing. And so since they're here, the question becomes, how do we make sure we're really preparing young people for the future that they will inherit?
And are young people the focus more than teachers? I feel like, teachers are going to have to embrace these technologies to teach kids, but in a lot of ways, the younger generation is sort of moving the older generation forward because they're already using these technologies
Right.
and they're already more familiar with them in many cases than people who are their educators.
100%. So I would say that it is not so much that the students are the focus more than the educators. These are technologies that are disrupting the world for all of us. And we want to make sure that educators are being equipped and supported to understand, one, the ways in which the world of work is evolving and how this is going to impact the world that their students will, be responsible for leading us in the future. But also, we want to make sure that they're supported to really embrace and leverage these technologies effectively in their schools and in the classroom. And along those lines is really why we're grateful and proud of our partners at Duval County Public Schools for the manner in which they are already supporting educators through an AI institute to really begin to grapple deeply with these technologies and learn more about them. It is a both and kind of scenario, and we need to make sure that we're doing both of those things simultaneously. I could not agree more with the point you raised, that young people are at the forefront of these innovations. And I've seen firsthand, we had a recent partnership convening the Urban Education Symposium with the My Village Project. And we're so proud to see the young people really teaching the adults how to leverage these technologies effectively and helping them do things that they were trying to do by utilizing the tools.
Isabel, you have said that replacing, or in some ways, redefining intelligence and looking more at relational intelligence as opposed to IQ as a measurement. Relational intelligence includes a lot of possible components, whether that's conflict resolution or empathy or creativity, all of those things can be a different kind of intelligence that we can acquire. But some would argue, and I might be among them, that there are certain new technologies that are impairing even those skills uh, much more than, 15 or 20 years ago. And social media is probably a big factor in that. It has created a world where people are less likely to have face to face, perhaps, connections, and maybe have a more difficult time developing skills like empathy. I wonder what you say in terms of how those technological disruptions might be changing these alternate forms of human intelligence that you think are so important for the future.
Such a beautiful question, Anne, and clearly the area of huge research questions that you're touching on. So there is a set of researchers that have published now multiple reports that are quite concerning. They are all around this phenomenon called the crutch effect. Essentially, when we have a crutch, physical crutch, our muscles get atrophied in some ways. Similarly here with AI, if AI makes things too easy and reduces efforts from, in terms of learning, learners may become more passive and rely on it and then develop fewer skills. So there is a clear concern here that, for example, if students are using AI to write essays without thinking critically about what they write, it's clearly an example of, a crutch effect over time of maybe students learning less how to write. So what I would love for all of us to think, and there is a big question out there, there are also a set of research that shows that AI can act not as a crutch, but as a catalyst, and really studying more when can it be a catalyst for learning. And it does so when, and it's not only related to AI, it's more broadly when we are able as educators to spark deeper engagements from our youth, creativity, exploration. And so when we observe those phenomena in research, when students are using AI to brainstorm, to collaborate with others, and refine ideas, then it obviously leads to stronger outcomes. So, the tension is really right here in front of us, as Rachael was pointing out too, is do we want AI to become a crutch that weakens essentially human learning and well-being, or a catalyst that actually accelerates and augments human intelligence?
And to be clear, I apologize with your accent. Are you saying crutch effect? Could you spell that for me?
Yeah, like a crutch, like when you have a physical accident, CRUTCH.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure that I was talking about the same thing. And so you're saying that we need to make sure that these things are catalyzing development as opposed to becoming something that we lean on so heavily that our skills atrophy.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
I'm curious, one of the things, Isabelle, that's been talked about a lot is the need to discern things that are fake. And I know that you've spoken and written about, the human intelligence and that skill set being something that can help us discern between things that are fake, whether they're images or deep fakes or, whatever. And that humans can be instrumental in that. I'm curious if you think that AI also can be the method for discerning fakes. I mean, it seems to me of all the things that AI can do in terms of processing enormous amounts of information and pulling out things that matter, that it could be more helpful and perhaps even more helpful than humans in terms of helping us figure out what's real and what's not.
Yeah, so there are indeed many techniques that could be deployed in reducing misinformation, and some could be AI generated. So there's a big question out there on how do we do this better. Right now, there's limited ability through AI system to decipher what is, real or not. You really need to go and verify whether the information that you have been getting, whether it's a text-based or video-based, is accurate or not. There are techniques that could be deployed. They are not as publicly facing right now. So it's maybe a policy question for some of our policymakers on how to deploy those technologies. It's not a technology problem. It's more of a human will problem.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Rachael, this is a difficult time for educators generally. We're looking at a system that is already stressed by chronic absenteeism among students post-COVID. School safety is a real concern. Politics has gotten very heavy in the schools these days, particularly here in Florida. Funding. So there's so many things that educators and students are coping with right now very much real and on the table right now. Adding AI to the mix, do you think that that is going to just push some educators out of it entirely? Or do you think that they're going to be able to kind of catch this momentum and embrace it and incorporate it?
It's a really good question, and you're absolutely right. There is so much, so very much going on in the world of education right now. To your question about whether kind of the need to embrace or sort of determine how best to leverage these technologies, whether that's something that's going to push sort of educators out of the profession, I think that comes down to, how much support we're willing to provide them along the journey. And it's really always been about that. When we're talking about, some of these challenges, chronic absenteeism, it's really a collective we, challenge. These are the things that we, as a community, as an education ecosystem, need to be together grappling with. I am definitely of the opinion and on the side of, we want to make sure that the education system and the educators who are a part of it are supported to do the things that are going to position our students for success, because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And so it is both about, how do we make sure that we're mindful about the world of work that these students are going to be a part of. I've heard a statistic somewhere that 65% of jobs that these students will be in, they don't even exist yet. And it's because of things like these changes with the technologies. And so, the function of education is to prepare young people. And we want to make sure that educators are receiving the support they deserve to do that job effectively.
And to students, I mean, we just got an email from Ricardo, and he says, what would you say to a high school academic counselor in terms of advising their students as they seek out college and career paths?
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear, Isabel's thoughts on this as well. But I think, as far as, the world of work and where it's headed, and really the opportunities that are here, and the ones that are coming, it's really important for young people to, number one, continue to lean into their interests. I know a lot of times, we kind of look at the data and it's kind of like, is this job even going to exist? People thrive when they're in opportunities that are a good fit for what they feel they are good at and what they're interested in. And so if I'm a young person and I'm heading into college, I need to first and foremost think about where my heart is and where my passion is.
Mhm.
And then I want to think about like what skills I can develop and what opportunities are going to be available to me in order to really sort of capitalize upon that unique wiring that I have. We'll be curious for any thoughts that Isabel would have in addition to those.
I'm going to ask you that, Isabel, but I'm going to pile on one more because we got a message from Amanda on Facebook. And she says, I'd just like to add that our millennial generation of teachers might be the most nimble to navigate this AI transition, since they are the first generation of digital natives. She says this is a great opportunity for them to lead us into the innovative uses of AI and digital technology in K through 12 and higher education. I just want to get your thoughts about that, Isabel.
I love that question from your audience, because actually I was going to touch on this. I find that the education sector is one of the most innovative with AI right now. The education sector is adopting this technology, is trying it, and our teachers are just doing an incredible job with it. When I hear Rachael speak about an AI institute that didn't exist literally 2 or 3 years ago, or frameworks, I was just checking some stats on. Now we have in the U.S. more than 50% of our states that have adopted AI frameworks. This is incredible pace in just 2 or 3 years, incredible pace of change and adoption and innovation from our education system, because our educators are, as you pointed out, they see what the future is looking like. They want to be at the cutting edge of what the future of jobs will look like. They want to support our youth to be really leading and driving in this new area.
Well, I would be remiss as a public media representative if I didn't point out, Isabelle, Hau, that you actually co-starred with Grover of Sesame Street in a recent production. But Isabelle Hau will be here in town September 23rd, speaking with my other guest, Rachael Tutwiler, Fortune. It is sponsored by the Jacksonville Public Education Fund, or JPEF, and you can find information about how to get tickets to that event at jpef.org. Thank you both so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne. We really appreciate you having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Up next, an ambitious multimedia production explores America's World War II history from D-Day to VE Day. Welcome back. Broadway performers, the local symphony, and an acclaimed homegrown historian come together for a sprawling multimedia production about World War II. Here to discuss it, we're joined via video by the project's creator, John Monsky, writer, executive producer, and narrator of the American History Unbound series. Good morning, John.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're also joined here in studio by Kimberly Wolfson, event co-chair and also board member of the Wolfson Family Foundation. Good morning, Kimberly.
Good morning, Anne.
So, John, this is a project that you're performing in Jacksonville, but it's just one of several epic productions that you've created, including about the Vietnam War, going to the moon, the Great War, and the Great Gatsby. Tell us a little bit about the Eyes of the World, this production from D-Day to VE Day. What is the animating idea behind it? What's the story you're telling?
Well, all these productions have a story and an arc to them. This one is this starts with really four figures, and it's a story of Ernest Hemingway, J.D. Salinger, Robert Capa, the famous war photographer, and Lee Miller, the famous fashion model who became a war photographer. And it turns out all four of these figures were connected and were friends, and we see the momentous effort of the United States Army from D-Day to VE Day in Europe through their eyes. And it's an incredible story between the way the war affected them, what they saw. That's why we call it Eyes of the World. It's the war through their eyes. Also, that's a famous line from Eisenhower's words that he gave to the troops, "The eyes of the world are upon you." So it's a kind of dramatic event, and it's filled with a lot of elements.
Yeah, and this is something that you've performed at Carnegie Hall, at the Kennedy Center, at Symphony Hall in Boston. And so I know people are very excited to have it here in Jacksonville, but it is a stage full of elements. Like you said, I mean, there is the kind of film element, there's photographs, there's sound that is pulled from historical events. There's also Broadway vocalists. There are an entire symphony orchestra on stage. And then you are narrating this event. Can you tell us about how all of those elements come together and how you were able to sort of weave this story with so many kind of ambitious participants, you know, and pieces to it?
It's all the elements are there to drive the story. I like to call it emotional history. You have the orchestra is the core of it, and the entire program, whether you think of it as sort of Ken Burns or Hamilton, the orchestra is playing almost the entire time, underscoring the story that I'm telling, or playing, you know, Glenn Miller, all songs from the period, Aaron Copland. Music is interwoven to the story of these four figures. But it's not just the orchestra. There's the Broadway performers. We have an incredible cast coming down. Kate Rockwell, who was in Mean Girls, plays Lee Miller. Daniel Yearwood, who was in Hamilton, plays Salinger. Nicholas Rodriguez, who was in Company, a bunch of shows, is Hemingway. And then Shireen Ahmad plays Kappa. And she was recently My Fair Lady. So you put together the orchestra, you put together the singers. I'm narrating, telling the story, and interacting with them. And then there's some other elements. Occasionally, we'll see some historic flags from the period and the event. And there's people too that we wherever we go, we find people that are related to the show. Ernest Hemingway's great grandson appeared at the last one. Lee Miller's, Salinger's son. In Jacksonville, we have part of the show talks about the 688, all female, all black battalion in the war. We have family members from 688 in Jacksonville. Of course, we got a great military history. So all of these elements come together to create a different experience. So the bad news is I have a really hard time explaining this to people, but when they get there, they see something really different.
Yeah, and I think that they get it instantly. I alluded to this fact, John, but I mean, you come from a really storied Jacksonville family. Your mother was Joan Monsky, who founded Theater Works and the film festival here. Your father was the head of Universal Marion Company, which people who've lived here long enough will know occupied the former JEA building with the kind of the octagonal windows, and had a big role in Wall Street, also funded the film, the producers. So your family's footprint in Jacksonville is substantial. And you, I guess, spent at least some of your childhood here, grew up here. Is that right?
Oh, I grew up here. I consider myself first and foremost a Jacksonville boy. My brother's here, Robert, and his wife Tess. My sister will be coming back for the show. This is I've been everywhere. I've been to I had the great honor of performing in the White House, the Boston Pops, New Orleans for the World War II Museum, Yale, NYU, Carnegie Hall. But there's nothing more important to me than coming back to Jacksonville. This is where my heart is. I lost both my parents over the last 2 years, and my brother and sister were saying, maybe we should do a memorial service. And then we turned around and said that mom and dad would want to do something for the community. So we hope the community enjoys this, and this is for Jacksonville.
Wow. Well, I know people are really looking forward to it. Kimberly Wolfson, I want to bring you into the conversation because there's actually some cross connections that you have with John Monsky, including the fact that Lewis Wolfson, who is related to you in some capacity, was the guy that founded Universal Marion Company, which was the company we were just talking about.
Right.
And you also are somewhat related to John.
Yes, I am. My grandmother is a Monsky, and actually my grandmother, one of her sisters, and a first cousin of theirs, all Monskys, married 3 Wolfson brothers, one of them being Lou Wolfson.
Okay, and so there is a connection here, but the Women's Board is bringing in this performance not because of some familial connection, but because it really is something that speaks to the military community here in Jacksonville, and also just to kind of our appreciation of history.
Right. It kind of was this, perfect opportunity to be able to, thanks to John and his siblings and their generosity, bring this performance to Jacksonville, and their willingness to let us have this program be here as a fundraiser for the Children's Hospital. And we saw a lot of parallel in the story of the eyes of the world, and ultimately what is a message of hope in spite of, overwhelmingly challenging odds. And we see that in the Children's Hospital, which when we all come together, which is what we as a Women's Board have the goal of doing, raising funds and awareness for our Children's Hospital and spreading that message to the community. And when we all come together, we're able to support children and their families in their, darkest times and provide them with the hope that they will receive the very best medical care here in our community.
Sure, and accomplish great things as, soldiers did in World War II, John. I wanted to ask you, I know that part of your inspiration and for the productions that you've done is this collection that you've had your entire life of flags, banners, flags, and that you began collecting them really as a young person. I think maybe your first acquisition was like a Teddy Roosevelt kerchief, but your mother played a role in encouraging that. Can you talk about, first of all, the collection that you have? It's enormous, and how that has contributed to the productions and their role in them.
Well, I grew up in Jacksonville in the shadow of the Vietnam War. I was on the young side of it, but it was still there. And the space program. And we had our share of flags, important flags. It was always important to me, being a historian. And when I was in college, I called up my dad and said, I think I want to stay here and be a history professor. There was a pause at the end of the phone. He said, you'll starve. I went to be a historian. I went to be a lawyer, but along the way, I never gave up history. And one of the ways I stayed in connection with it, like many Americans, and sure many of your listeners, I decided to collect something in historical space. And for me, flags were the attraction. And I've raised 4 kids, and every Flag Day, they bring over their friends and their friends' parents and people that we were close to, and I talk about one of the flags. And this whole thing emerged out of that tradition on Flag Day of telling these stories. I never dreamed it'd end up at Carnegie Hall, be 2-hour productions with 60-piece orchestras and 4 Broadway singers, but that's how I started it. So the kids said, oh, what did we encourage? That was a big mistake. But that's how it all came about.
And the reason that these flags, help tell a story is because you have found the story of these flags, right? They're not just an item or a banner. You actually track down where they've been, where they were flown. You have photographs of some of them when they were, in action, essentially, when soldiers were flying them going into battle.
Yeah, I've always thought about a period of history that I wanted to study, the Vietnam War or the space program, and then gone out and sought the flags. So this particular production that you'll see in Jacksonville on September 30th starts with a flag that came in on a landing craft, just like you see in Saving Private Ryan. There's larger flags that preserve. The smaller flags from the small boats are almost impossible to find. So I started looking at that particular flag. We came into Omaha, in Utah. This one came into Utah. And on that boat, or a boat nearby, was an intelligence officer. It turns out his name is J.D. Salinger, and that's where the story starts. And I think after you see this production, you'll never read Catcher in the Rye the same way.
Mm. The cross connections that you uncovered are really remarkable. I mean, you mentioned Ernest Hemingway, but there is also Pablo Picasso is a figure in this. Marlene Dietrich is a figure in this. You mentioned J.D. Salinger. How those are new stories to, I think, certainly to me, probably to a lot of people. Those must have been really special discoveries to make in the work that you've done as a historian.
Well, as I turned every page, I was like, wow, I think we know of these figures as separate, discrete, famous people, but the fact that they were all in this big chill experience is amazing. And, Salinger nobody's heard of him. He's this kid that shows up on the beach. He's a 25-year-old intelligence officer. He's writing short stories, sending them home, and then in August, he realizes Hemingway is embedded in the 4th Division, and they run into each other. And part of the story starts from there. But in the same circle is Lee Miller, and she's taking her pictures. And her family gave me access to 6,000 of her pictures. You're going to see a lot of them in this show, blasted on the screen, and you don't normally see them that large. And then Lee Miller, who's friends with Hemingway, she's also friends with Robert Capa, who takes the greatest pictures, most critics would say, of the war, which are what Saving Private Ryan is based on. And with the permission of his estate, and you will see those on a mega-sized screen, which you don't normally get to see. And that's what was used for Saving Private Ryan. Those core pictures are the closest pictures of the Omaha beach that we have.
Wow.
And Hemingway's story of coming into that beach is chilling. And you'll hear his voice and his words about coming into that beach. So for me, turning every page around these four figures was like a bit of time travel. And it's so fun to be able to share it with my friends in Jacksonville.
So for folks who've been watching our live stream, we've shown some of these images and shown a little bit of the production, but I'd like to just play some with audio so people can get a sense of how it sounds as well.
London, May 1944. The war correspondents are getting ready, and Ernest Hemingway, reporting for Collier's magazine, arrives on the scene. He's one of the most famous authors in the world, and he hates fascism.
For many years, you heard American people speak who admired Mussolini because he made the trains run on time in Italy. It never seemed to occur to them that we made the trains run on time in America without fascism.
Hemingway knows war. He was seriously injured, serving in the Red Cross in World War I, bringing chocolates and cheese to the front line.
So that's just a little sample of what people are going to see, Kimberly. I know that this is a pretty, epic event to take place with all of these moving parts. First of all, are there tickets still available? Are people able to attend?
There are tickets still available.
Okay.
We would encourage people to get them sooner rather than later. We're anticipating a full house. Tickets are available on the Women's Board's website, which is womensboardwch.com. And if you go to the Our Events tab, you'll find the Eyes of the World there.
Yeah. And John, I know that this is a bit of a homecoming. There's some personal stuff in this performance as well. I wonder if you could just briefly tell us, you've got a bronze star that you present during this performance that belonged to a family member.
Yeah, I had Leroy Monsky was, believe it or not, captain of the Alabama football team in 1937. And instead of going to the pros, he went to war. And you'll hear some of that story. I grew up all my life knowing he was a football hero. I had no conception of what he did during the war, but we will intersect with that when we're intersecting with Patton in Italy. And then, there's another Jacksonville figure that shows up that many people knew and loved. Hal Baumgarten landed on Omaha Beach, and I was working on the production. My dad said, "Don't you remember meeting Hal Baumgarten?" I was 6 years old. He walked me across the street to my next door neighbor, said, "You're going to meet a real hero, a war hero." And that was Dr. Hal Baumgarten, who came to Jacksonville Beach after the war. He took 4 bullets on Omaha Beach. The last one hit him in the jaw and finally took him down. But his widow, Rita, I'm hoping will be at the show. So there's a lot of connections. But for my family, it's meaningful because of
John Monsky.
Leroy,
I'm sorry, we're going to have to leave it there. I apologize. We're right up against the time. Kimberly Wolfson, John Monsky, thanks so much for being here. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm Rob Schmitz. After sending in the National Guard to Washington, D.C., President Trump has already set his sights on a new target.
Chicago's a mess. You have an incompetent mayor, grossly incompetent, and we'll straighten that one out probably next. That'll be our next one after this.
We hear reaction from Chicago next time on Here and Now.
Today at 1 on WJCT News 89.9.
Next in On Point's special series, Falling Behind.
Black boys, including my son, he is looked at as a problem versus an asset. And that follows them from pre-K into adulthood.
Reimagining Black boyhood and the schools that are doing it right. It's the latest in our week-long exploration, Falling Behind, the miseducation of America's boys. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9. This summer sees an uptick in COVID-19 cases as the new Stratus variant becomes the dominant one in the U.S. And the leading pediatric medical group breaks with the CDC's vaccine guidance for young children. For our latest installment of In Good Health, we answer your questions on COVID, vaccines, and more. Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, a summertime sight in the Northern Hemisphere raises its legendary tail in the night sky, but like the month of August, will soon disappear. Here to tell us about how to catch a glimpse of Scorpius is Eddie Whistler, our resident spaceman and planetarium director at MOSH. Good morning, Eddie.
Hello, good morning.
How are you?
Always good when I'm here.
I'm so glad to have you. Scorpius,
Yes.
quite a something to see, but not something we can see all the time.
Yeah, we're towards the end of its season. And so during the summertime, we have the opportunity, but it's late August. And this thing, if you look towards the south, you're going to find this kind of sweeping curve of medium brightness stars. That's all you need to know. It's easy enough to find. Look for the sweeping curve, kind of like an S curve, but tilted onto its side. It's not so upright anymore like it was in the middle, early in this month and late in July.
This is its like swinging tail.
It's its swinging tail, although it never swings. It's been the same arrangement for, thousands of years.
Okay, I get
But yes, if you use your imagination, it's swinging its tail around with its stinger. You could even find its stinger if you want to. But medium brightness, S curve, in a large portion of the southern sky, low on the horizon. Look for it, and you have found Scorpius.
Remind us, those of us who don't follow things so closely as you do, why it is that this is a seasonal viewing, what it is about viewing something from the Northern Hemisphere, whether we have a better view here in Florida than we might otherwise.
So let's stick with seasonality first. And then if we want to go north and south, then that's different. But if you, so we are around a bright object and we are a planet and we go around it and we turn towards our daytime side where we can't see any other stars. The sun hogs our attention. But then at night we turn away from the sun and we could see a nighttime sky. Okay. Now, take us 6 months later and put us around the other side of the sun. Now during the daytime, we can't see the thing. And now at night, our Earth spins. But we're looking out at a completely different side of what's available to us throughout the course of the year. And so it never happens where one day you're on one side of the sun and then the next day you're on the other side. It happens incrementally. You're doing 365 of these little turns. So night by night, things slowly change until 6 months later, you're just looking at a completely different sky. So the stars that you can see are seasonal as a result.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. And so that's one half of it. And then the other half is the fact that our view from the Northern and Southern Hemisphere is different. And this is sort of low on the horizon. Is that?
Okay. So if you were at the North Pole, you'd be looking up and out, right? And if you were at the South Pole, you'd be looking, I say up because it would still be over your head, but let's just say down and out. Why not? And so, clearly those are two different skies as well. And then if you incrementally change your latitude from the North Pole to the South Pole, the night sky would look different to you. But like very little changes. Like you could be familiar with the sky in Jacksonville and drive 6 hours to Miami, South Florida, look overhead. Not much is going to change.
Okay, pretty much the same. But this is our opportunity. So if I want to see Scorpius, say, tonight, and
Scorpius.
It's clear enough, where am I walking to? What's the best vantage point to get a clear view?
Yeah, so just you want to have a clear view to the south, and you want to be out where it's dark enough to be able to start seeing stars. But Scorpius, you can see even in your well-lit neighborhood. Just don't be right under a light. And people have been noticing Scorpius and talking about Scorpius for thousands of years. It's a Greek story. They told a story about Orion and Scorpius getting into a battle. Gaia was upset that Orion was talking smack about the animals of Earth and that he could hunt them all. And she's the goddess of Earth, so she sends Scorpius to battle Orion. They get into this amazing battle, and the gods commemorate the battle by putting them both up in the sky. But like any two kids who get into a fight at school, you kind of have to keep them like on separate sides of the classroom. So Scorpius sets and Orion rises. They're forever chasing each other. Summer is the season for Scorpius in the early evening, and what season is the season for Orion?
I'm going to guess it's winter.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yep, there you go. So the stories really build on the locations and the seasonality, interactions between characters in the sky, and so on.
It's all interconnected.
Come on, they knew it. And so that's how they told their stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just briefly, Eddie, I know that the museum is kind of in it's closed.
It's last week.
Last week.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
So Sunday in the planetarium, we are having our last laser show. That's going to be our cosmic concert in the evening at 5 o'clock. We are showing the best laser show that we have, Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd.
You can't beat it.
No, you can't beat it. And so if you want to celebrate and do the last thing that we are offering for the public to be able to do, then get a ticket for Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd. It's what makes laser shows that we've been, it's going to be a great time.
That's excellent. Well, Eddie Whistler, have a great final show there. We'll see you again next month. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'll keep coming back. We'll keep talking about
Yeah,
the
we
sky.
can't keep you out.
Come on.
No. All right. Well, that's our program. Thanks for listening. If you have comments or suggestions, you can send either to First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. And if you
Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com. The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Tidbits, family owned and operated since 1985, offers dine-in, catering, delivery, and takeout at Bay Meadows, Hendricks, and Mandarin locations. Menu items include fresh sandwiches, salads, and soups, open Monday through Saturday. Online ordering and menu at clarastidbits.com.